Okay. So functions of the integumentary system, the skin is accessorizing the integumentary system. So these are all pretty straightforward, right? We've got that layer of protection and temperature regulation. Just a little refresher, it's the blood vessels in the dermis, which is going to help regulate temperature. So if we are too warm, we will bring more blood into the blood vessels in the dermis, and we will actually release heat from the skin, okay? Cutaneous sensation, the ability to sense, is very important for many, many reasons. Okay, cutaneous sensation helps to provide a pleasurable environment. It helps to provide a safe environment. It helps to provide a comfortable environment. So cutaneous sensation gives us a sensation to realize what's happening in our environment so we're able to respond to it. Okay, metabolic functions. We actually use the skin for metabolic functions. Okay, vitamin D production is one of them. I believe I talked about that. A blood reservoir. Those dermal blood vessels actually have to store some of the blood from our body. Okay, and excretion. We excrete water and salt. So protection. Chemical protection, that acid mantle, a low pH, which helps to fight off bacteria, and melanin, which helps to protect us from sunlight. We also have what's called a glycolipid waterproofing between the cells. So this is going to be basically a large fat with a little bit of sugar attached to it, and it helps to provide waterproofing. It's sort of like the cement between the cells that are in the skin. And those keratinized cells, those protein-filled cells that we talked about, those keratinized cells help to provide protection to the skin as well. Biological, there are Langerhans cells of the epidermis. Those are macrophages. That's a nice little picture on the right there of a Langerhans cells. They are the macrophages of the epidermis, another front line of defense to protect us against any incoming infectious agents. Really cool thing, the DNA in the nuclei of cells will absorb UV light, and it actually vibrates a little bit. And by vibrating, it will absorb that UV light, turn it into heat, and dissipate it. And that helps to protect us against UV light from cells turning into cancerous cells. Okay. Cutaneous sensation. So there are Meissner corpuscles, there are Merkel discs, and there are Pacinian receptors. Okay. So the Meissner corpuscles and the Merkel discs actually will provide light, the sensation of light pressure. Okay, Pacinian. So the difference is those two are going to be light. Pacinian receptors will sense deep pressure. So as you start to press deeper, it's the Pacinian receptors that will sense that deeper pressure. Okay, so light touch or light pressure, Meissner corpuscles and Merkel discs will sense. Pacinian receptors sense that deeper pressure. Okay. And here we go. There's a cross section of a Pacinian corpuscle. Okay, it's in the deep layers of the dermis of the skin, and is surrounded by a loose connective tissue. So just remember that this is a two-dimensional picture of a little like round bulb-like receptor that we've cut in half. We're looking at inside at like nerves that are circled around and then surrounded by connective tissue. Okay. So metabolic functions of the skin. What happens is cholesterol that we ingest or our body makes, because we'll make cholesterol even if we don't ingest it, is sent to the skin, and when it is met with sunlight, it turns into a vitamin D precursor. That vitamin D then has to go to the liver, then the kidneys, and it becomes active. But the point is that the skin brings in vitamin D, modifies cholesterol, and it helps to start the process of creating vitamin D. Okay? Very important. Vitamin D is super important because vitamin D will help to absorb calcium from the small intestines, so our body can use that calcium for many physiological functions, such as beating of the heart, but it also strengthens the bones. Okay. Excretion. We excrete urea, ammonia, uric acid, water, and sodium through the skin. Urea is going to be the byproduct of protein breaking down. So part of where we get rid of that urea is through the skin, Most of where we get rid of it is through the urine. Okay, but that's just another area that we get rid of it. Skin cancer. So the different types of skin cancer here are going to be basal cell, squamous cell, and melanoma. Basal cell is going to come from that stratum basale, which is that basal or bottom layer that we talked about that's closest to the dermis. It's the least malignant, excuse me, and it's A, the picture A there. It tends to be shiny and sort of nodule looking. Squamous cells cancer is going to be of the keratinocytes of the stratum spinosum, that pointy layer that's in the middle, excuse me. It grows rapidly and it will metastasize or go to other areas of the body. So that one was the one, that's B, that my grandmother had. It had that flaky appearance. She kept picking at it. She thought it was like a pimple or something, and it was squamous cell carcinoma. Now, melanoma is when freckles change shape or coloration. Well, it's not, let me take that back before you look at the freckle that's changed shape recently, although you should have that looked at. Okay, melanoma will happen in freckles, and what it does is it tends to change the color or the size and shape of those pre-existing freckles or moles. Melanoma is dangerous. It is highly metastatic. It likes to travel into the lymph nodes and into the entire body. That's why it's really good to have all of your moles and your freckles checked. And if anything ever changes, to go to your doctor and have it looked at. Okay. So burns, loss of body fluids is going to be a huge thing with burns. They need to be replaced immediately. You need a certain amount of fluid in your body in order for all of our functions to happen. If there is massive loss, and we'll go through what is massive loss in just a minute. If there's massive loss of fluids, it's difficult not only for that person to survive, it's also difficult for them to heal. The other thing about, we're talking about third-degree burns, so really intensive burns or extensive burns, okay? The other thing about third-degree burns that we're talking about now is that the dermis will be exposed. Okay, I'm sorry, the hypodermis will be exposed so that patient is more prone to infectious agents because they don't have that protective layering anymore. Okay, so rule of nines. So the body broken down into 11 sections, each at 9%, and then 1% around the genitals. This breakdown helps us to gauge the severity and the distribution of a burn. So if you take a minute and look at the picture, the way it's broken down is the anterior trunk is 18%. Anterior of each leg is 9% each. The anterior of the face is 4%, you get it. The perineum, the genital area is 1%. So if my patient were to come in, with a full frontal burn on her right leg, that would be 9% has been burned. So you combine that percentage with the type of degree of burn to determine how dangerous it is. Okay, so first degree burn, pretty benign, pretty not dangerous. The epidermis is damaged, that patient gets red. Even if it's extensive all over the body, it's like if somebody gets a bad sunburn, they're going to feel sun poisoning, they're going to feel sick, but it's not life-threatening. It's not fun, but it's not life-threatening. Now, second degree burn, if you have 25% of the body or more burned with a second degree burn, which is going to be through the epidermis and the upper dermis when blisters appear, this is critical. Okay, this patient is going to lose enough seeping fluids through their skin, and they can have exposure through the blisters on their skin to infectious agents. So it is critical. They need to be taken care of, okay, in intensive care. Third degree, only 10% of the body creates a critical status for that patient. This is that full epidermal and dermal burn. It's gray-white, red or black. They probably have to be debrided, I always say that wrong, okay, and get rid of that dead skin cell, and they will have to put either, I know that they're using pig skin. I also know that they're using something that's oh gosh, I want to say it's an extracellular matrix basis. It's genetically engineered. okay, skin that they can cover with. I'm not sure what they're using in Syracuse. If any of my nurses know that, let me know. I'd love to know. Okay, it's treated with removal, okay, the debriding, and then pig skin and grafts if a graft needs to happen. Okay, it's pretty intensive. Development of, did I skip this? No, okay. Development. So we're talking about the embryological development, the fetal development, okay, of the skin. There are 3 layers. If you don't remember them, please go and review, okay? There are 3 layers: ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm. 3 layers. And then from those 3 layers, the fetus develops all its body parts. So the epidermis is going to be from what's called the ectoderm, okay? And you know what, we'll go over more of this in the future, but please just sort of put these little nuggets in your brain for now. Dermis and hypodermis are from the mesoderm, which is easy to remember because it's the middle layer, mesoderm. Developed by the 4th month. Isn't that amazing? Then we have those lanugo hairs, which are delicate hairs, which are on the fetus to help to provide warmth for that baby. And then vernix caseosa, which are sebaceous glands in the body that are secreted upon birth, when they're in the uterus, and it provides this. Actually, I have a picture with both my boys. It's like a cheesy layer, I don't know how better to say it, that provides a waterproofing for them towards the end of pregnancy, so their skin doesn't get affected by the water in the uterus. So vernix caseosa, it's like a cheesy kind of fatty looking layer. It's not clumpy, it's more a fatty looking layer that's on the baby, that's whitish looking, that's secreted right before they're born. I shouldn't say right before they're born, a couple weeks before they're born, to provide a waterproofing for the baby. Okay, might even be more than a couple weeks before. I apologize for that. So vernix caseosa. Okay, so that is skin. That's the skinning with skin. Pretty basic, pretty straightforward, but as usual, if you have any questions, write them down. Let me know. I'd be happy to get back to you. The big thing to take away from this lecture is skin cancer. Make sure that you have a good visual on those. People who are going into nursing or nurse practitioners or whoever I'm talking to out there, even if you're not in healthcare, even if you're looking at your husband's back or your spouse's back or your sister's back and something looks funny, have it get checked. I've had one of my patients had a mole on her breast, and it turned out to be malignant melanoma. It was going to go into her breast, and she showed up. I mentioned to her just briefly, like, go get that checked. She did. She showed up the next week with flowers. She was like, thank you. You saved my life. Better to get it checked than not. So that's a take-home message if you learn nothing else. But learn a lot, learn it all. All right, thanks.